Good morning. All right. Boot that. We were talking about the funding approval for Atlanta's Cop City, and guys, this one's fun. This was going to be a whole lot of fun. We'll be with you in just a minute. And good morning. I got my pretty shirt on today because I'm going out to make deliveries on a project that we just finished up. And guys, I'm thrilled to see we've got a bunch of people watching over on Rumble. And I got to tell you, we were thrown off of YouTube for a hot minute recently, as many of you remember. And views did not suffer dramatically, because quite frankly, we're just getting a lot more traffic on Rumble now. And I'm getting less and less concerned, not just less and less concerned with whether or not we stay on YouTube, but frankly, less interested in bothering with YouTube. As we go forward, especially into the election season, I definitely see a world where we just give up on YouTube altogether, as much as it pains me to think we might do that. Because we built originally on YouTube. But I'm thrilled to see you guys on Rumble, and those of you who haven't started using Rumble, do. You really need to go check out Rumble. Pro tip, one of the cool things about Rumble is that if you pull up something on your phone on Rumble, you can minimize it and just listen to it, right? Whereas with the YouTube app, you have to pay for the YouTube, whatever their paid subscription thing is called. You have to pay for that on YouTube. So you can't just pull up this show, for example, and listen to me as an audio podcast while you're driving. If you're watching on YouTube, you can do that while we're on Rumble, which means you can listen to me live in the morning when you're driving to work if you're using the Rumble app. So definitely check that out. Thanks for joining us this morning. I was kind of torn on what to talk about this morning because there were two trending topics that really have my interest, and one of them, frankly, I would have preferred to save for tomorrow or Thursday when Cameron's with us, because of the cop angle. But that's the one I'm going with. The other one was hashtag climate scam, which I might get to in the near future, but it's kind of done to death. But this thing with hashtag Stop Cop City, boy, oh boy, is this an interesting story. And the reason it's an interesting story, in my opinion, is because this is a clear-cut case of the left eating its own. So I'll give you a little background to kind of catch you up to what's going on with this. In Atlanta, they are building a training facility that is going to be used to train police officers, firefighters, first responders, right? We had something like this in the military in Hawaii. We had a modern urban tactical training center that we used to do, obviously, modern urban tactical training. It was a small city built to replicate some of the kind of semi-urban conditions that we fight in underdeveloped countries like Afghanistan. And so it's a little city. It's got buildings in it. It's got a bank. It's got a hotel. It's got a bunch of houses, storefronts, etc. So you go into one of the storefronts. There are countertops for people to hide behind, set up ambushes through. The hotel was, I think, 3 stories, so you've got an elevated roof for a sniper position. The bank was 2 stories, same thing, elevated roof for a sniper position. Windows everywhere, and junk cars parked on the street to simulate cars being parked there, and because that is a tactical interest. Not a car parked on the street could be cover in a gunfight, or it could be an IED, all that kind of stuff. So we used that for some pretty significant training, and the base even made a deal with a local airsoft company. This was back when Task Force Murder Machine was just eating up airsoft games every other weekend, and we were using that as a supplement to our general tactical training. And there was a deal struck with the base leadership and the local airsoft group and the Wounded Warrior Project, and we ran we did it 3 years in a row. Well, I was there for 3 years in a row. I think they still do it, but on the first one, in 3 days, the way it worked was we had to have military police escort civilians to the training facility from the front gate. But we had it from Friday evening to Sunday evening, and we ran an airsoft game out there. 400 players playing all day and all night, running scenarios throughout the city, raised over $10,000 for the Wounded Warrior Project. And the only, we weren't selling anything except for access. It was just pay to play, right? $20 at the gate, pay to play, and we accepted additional donations. And guys, we had a blast. That first year that I did it, I had my unit with me, and we got on one of the 4 100-man teams. There were 20-something of us. And I seeing my first sergeant get up on top of that roof with my airsoft 240 Bravo and just hosing people down with the biggest grin I've ever seen on the man's face, it was worth every bit of it. So this training facility is going to be something like that, a little more modern, a little more updated. And it's there to train police in tactics and engagement. It's there to train firefighters on different scenarios involving different types of buildings and different types of environmental concerns. Hey, all of a sudden we've got an empty building where we don't have to shut anything down for paramedics to practice running up flights of stairs in a building where the power's out and trying to recover casualties from the upper floor of a building when they don't have access to elevators or whatever. There are so many scenarios that you train for basic, and you have to get imaginative for advanced, right? Your favorite TV shows that are police procedural dramas or whodunits or 911 emergency rescue type of stuff right? All the drama happens when something out of the ordinary comes into play. And what's interesting, like the action catches your eyeballs, but what engages your mind is we have an unusual problem to solve, and the hero of the piece does that by applying complex logic, experience, and training to an unknown situation so that they can come up with a satisfactory result, given outstanding odds against that achievement, right? Well, a facility like this creates the opportunity to simulate and act out extraordinary situations for which you do not have original basic training. Now, this is a little bit tricky for me to talk about because I've been hard on some cops lately. I have. The quality of our police officers has degraded dramatically over the last many, many years. The fact of the matter is that what a police officer is today is not the same thing as what a police officer was when I was a kid, right? When I was a kid, we had the DARE program, and I know the DARE program still exists, but it was a legitimate outreach anti-drug program. We had great officers that would come in. We had one that brought his pet snake one time and talked about, how certain types of drug dealers get into different types of illegal activity, like fostering and breeding illegal exotic animals and stuff like that. We had one officer that his favorite joke was to come in, he'd have the board, and this is what this drug looks like, and this is what this drug looks like, and this is what this drug looks like. And, hey, so that this is what marijuana smells like. Oh, hey, anybody want to smell the cocaine? Ha, 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 ha. Right? And it was a good joke, and we all had fun. Today, your average police officer, we live in a country where the homicide solve rate is 50%. It's a little under 50% at the national level. Where I live in Rockdale County, we've talked about this on the show before, our sheriff's department in Rockdale County has a statistically 0% homicide solve rate. And you might, those of you who don't know, who don't live here or who aren't local, might think, well yeah, but, Conyers is a pretty small town. Rockdale County is the smallest county in the state of Georgia. So you might think, well, there just aren't homicides to solve. En contraire, we sit right off of I-20. We are on the I-20 corridor. We are the last kind of pseudo-metropolitan stop before you are into Metro Atlanta proper. There is a lot of drug trafficking, human trafficking, and gang activity that routes through, pauses in, and stages from Rockdale County, Georgia, precisely because it's on that I-20 corridor, which is one of the biggest trafficking routes in the world because of its proximity to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, which is the busiest airport on the planet. Nowhere in the world does more human and drug trafficking cross from point A to point B than right here in Metro Atlanta. And us being on the lower east side of Metro Atlanta, everything that comes up through Florida comes up either through us or around the other side through Macon. Now, that said, the point to all that is there are homicides. Now, I say statistically zero solve rate. We actually had a triple homicide right around the corner in my backyard just about 2 months ago. And they solved that one. Right? In fairness, they solved that one. They managed to solve that one because the perpetrator entered the home, murdered his family, and then sat there and waited for the police to come and get him. So to say they solved that one, let's be fair, or let's be reasonable, is incredibly generous. Now, the Cop City thing. There has been a movement against Cop City since its inception a few years ago. I want to say it was about this time in 2021 when they first approved the project and began the work on it. Since then, there has been a movement calling itself ostensibly things like Save the Forest. And the claim they make is that the proposed Cop City is going to take a chunk of forested land that's in a poor black community in Atlanta, and it's going to tear down this forest to put up the facility. And their real concern is for the trees. Except we know very clearly, this is not speculation or supposition based on thin evidence. No. The statement I'm about to make is based on arrests made following terror attacks committed by the members and the agitators and activists of the Save the Forest group, who turn out to also be Antifa members, BLM supporters, and foreign nationals. So we know that the whole Save the Forest rhetoric is an utter fraud, a complete facade for a terrorist organization, which, by the way, has maintained an autonomous zone, which is to say, are engaged in active insurrection within the city of Atlanta. They've killed more than a few police officers. They've conducted coordinated firebombing attacks and raids on the proposed site and on neighboring police facilities. Right? These are Biden's voters. And here's where it gets fun. So are the people who are voting to establish, initiate, and fund this project. Right? The fact of the matter is, this is being done. This is being done by and opposed by Democrats. Right? So yesterday they were open for public comment before the vote on funding. So Twitter has updated, but let's take a peek here. We've got Shaney Bo Brainy says, I hope that all 11 of these Fs never have another good day in their entire lives. F you, this is disgusting. Stop Cop City. And we see the people here. These are not Republicans. Right? And you'll notice that most of them, especially the ones voting yes, most of them are black men and women. Right? We got a white guy here, we got a maybe white woman here, but black man, Asian man, right? Black woman. It's a bunch of black Democrats voting to do this. And we've seen the polling on Democrats, especially black Democrats generally. The majority of them say that they want more police policing their communities, not less. But the vocal group, the vocal calls, have been to defund the police. And as you've all seen, these aren't just fringe lunatics making those vocal calls. They are the elected representatives of fringe lunatics, like Ocasio-Cortez, for example. She was very vocal on defunding the police. Basically every elected Democrat that you have has been vocal on defunding the police. Now, there are many Republicans who have been vocal on defunding the FBI and the ATF, myself included. And there's a huge difference between the arguments. So the defund the police people, their argument is that law enforcement is inherently evil. And it's a tool of white supremacy to suppress racial minorities or some such nonsense. And their argument is supported exclusively by the claim that there are more black men in prison, at least per capita, than there are white men, or there's a higher percentage of convictions. Yeah, well, the numbers don't lie. There's a higher percentage of them committing crimes as well. Now, on the other side, you got guys like me who say defund the FBI, defund the ATF, abolish those entities. So there's actually two different arguments going on here. For the ATF, it's as simple as the mere existence of the ATF is an abomination to the Constitution. Right? The Constitution not only does not allow for the creation of the entity that we know as the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, right? The Bureau of the ATF is explicitly forbidden by the Constitution. The Second Amendment alone says that the ATF cannot exist legally. Now, with the FBI, the argument is the institution is so obviously and grossly corrupt that it cannot be saved. At best, it can be abolished and reconstituted afresh. And even that's a stretch because, and we've done some kind of slightly more than shallow dives on the history of the FBI. We'll be doing some in-depth on the FBI in the not too distant future, where we're going to talk basically, Razor Fist did that wonderful video, Hollywood Was Always Red. There was never a point in the history of the FBI. The FBI was founded for the explicit purpose of being a corrupt law enforcement organization. It has never not been a corrupt weaponization of the law against free citizens for the purpose of achieving political power. The FBI is a monster and needs to be defunded and abolished. Now, the police generally, from their inception, do not necessarily require that the organization itself be corrupt. It has turned out that way. And the corruption of modern policing is not one of the influence of criminality, blackmailing or payrolling police officers, but rather it's been infected with apathy, nihilism, narcissism, and just basically given up on doing the job it's expected to do. So agents of law enforcement organizations today, local law enforcement, your sheriffs, your police, etc., there might be some good guys in there who think they're doing good things, but they're still, at the core of them, they are no more than mere revenue collectors. It's not your average police officer who will never solve a major crime, who will never collar a real criminal. It's the majority of your police officers. In a country where actual legitimate criminals outnumber police officers substantially, that the majority of your police officers will never interact with one of those criminals should strike you as alarming. One major downfall that has made the police what they are, the corrupt things that they've become, the lazy and corrupt wastes that they've become, is a lack of adequate, substantial training. I know you've seen some fat cops. You've probably even seen some fat soldiers. It aggravates me to no end to see fat cops and fat soldiers. See a lot more donut munching barrel-ass pud pullers on police uniforms, though, than you do sporting an ACU or a BDU. Right? Fat soldiers happen. Fat cops are the norm. Anytime you see a fat cop, you need to remind yourself, hey, that's a fat cop. That means that he's unfit to do the job for which I am being extorted at gunpoint to pay him. He's paid to do a job. And part of that job is to maintain a standard of physical fitness. You're paid to do that job. You do it. So, as we see this story develop, I am honestly getting more and more interested in trying to get some interviews with the people that are involved in the Cop City project, and this could be very interesting going forward. So I've got just a couple minutes left here, and I have an article from the AP News about the funding that just went through, and I want to look at a little bit of that with you this morning before we get off the air. Yeah, Pitt Danny says annual PFT for all. Pitt, Danny was a Marine, I was a soldier. I tell you what, PT test. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but honestly, if you do your job the way I did my job when I was active duty, right? You'd hear people, they bitch and moan about the PT test because I worked around a bunch of nerds, a bunch of desk riders who still maintained their physical fitness to a much more substantial degree than your average police officer, your average police precinct. But, you'd hear people bitch and moan about having to take the PT test. Oh, you're going to run 2 miles, you're going to do a shitload of push-ups, a shitload of sit-ups, and buddy, for my unit, when it was PT test day, that was like having the day off from PT. Oh, we're just going to run 2 miles and knock out some push-ups, sit-ups? Real? I don't have to throw on my full battle rattle and run 5 miles with a 200-pound rucksack carrying a litter with a casualty on it? All right. So, at the Atlanta City Council early Tuesday approved funding for the construction of take dose. Atlanta City Council early Tuesday approved funding for the construction of a proposed police and firefighting training center, rejecting the pleas of hundreds of activists who packed City Hall and spoke for hours in fierce opposition to the project that decries Cop City. This is from the AP News, by the way, and I want to give them a little bit of credit because they accurately said this: pleas of hundreds of activists. Okay, we've said it before, we'll say it again. Politics is local. All politics is local. Here's what I want you to remember. If you do not take your ass down to City Hall or the City Council or wherever it is that they're having the public comment sections and things like that for these issues, then you are allowing the activists to speak on your behalf. Right? If you are for something and you don't show up and say it, then the people who do show up and speak are speaking on your behalf by creating the illusion in the media that the large voice, that the large noisy crowd represents the majority opinion. And as we're learning with the Target boycotts, the Bud Light boycotts, now Harley Davidson boycotts, the fact of the matter is that the majority do not share the opinions of the vocal minority. They don't. We don't. Still haven't had a Bud Light this month. I haven't had a Bud Light this year. I'm relatively certain I haven't had one this decade. The 11-4 vote just after 5 a.m. is a significant victory for Mayor Andre Dickens, a black Democrat, right? And I mean, I could give a shit. We've had Atlanta's had a Democrat mayor for as long as I can remember, and they've all been, their corruption. Okay, when Mayor Kasim Reed did not run again and was followed by Mayor Black Girl Magic Keisha Lance Bottoms, Clark Howard, who is a financial guru, I believe a major in the, he's not in the reserve, he's in the National Guard or something similar, or civil defense, something like that. But Clark Howard's a great guy, and Clark Howard does shows on conservative networks, but he is always explicitly non-political. He talks about money, finances, economics, where to get the good deals, how to avoid the bad scams, all that stuff. And when Keisha Lance Bottoms was running for office, he actually made an anti-endorsement statement that, hey, the city of Atlanta, and most especially Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, is run badly because of Kasim Reed's corruption. And Keisha Lance Bottoms is just an acolyte of his that will continue that same corruption that deteriorates the functions of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Right? For somebody who just never makes a political statement to come out and say something like that. And Pitt Danny says Clark's very liberal. I don't know Clark, and I haven't had anywhere to pick that up from, because he is so good about hiding his... I think he leans a little more libertarian, but he is so good about kind of keeping that out of his commentary when he's talking economics, because his show is not politics. So, just for a little context there on what the politics of Atlanta look like. And of course, Mayor Andre Dickens is another black Democrat. That's just what they elect in Atlanta for mayor, is black Democrats. And it's working out great for him. For about 14 hours, residents again and again took to the podium to slam the project, saying it would be a gross misuse of public funds to build the huge facility in a large urban forest in a poor majority black area. We're here pleading our case to a government that has been unresponsive, if not hostile, to an unprecedented movement in our city council's history, said Matthew Johnson, the executive director of Beloved Community Ministries, and here's all you need to know, a social justice nonprofit. These words right here, social justice, especially this word justice, perhaps the greatest injustice that we have suffered as Americans in living memory is the corruption of the word justice. Right? This is just like, gay rights, trans rights, etc., etc. Well, we just want the same rights as everybody. You have the same rights as everybody. You're a fucking liar. What you want is special privileges to give you additional or preferential access to things which are meant to be accessible by everyone equally and protected equally under the law in compliance with the 14th Amendment equal protection clauses, right? Your affirmative action that there should be a quota to hire more special identity group than other special identity group, that's not equal rights. That's special privileges. And that's what social justice is all about, is stealing. It's armed robbery where the gun in question is identity politic and the blackmailing threat of, if you don't give me what I want, I will libel and defame you to your financial detriment. That's what social justice is. Training center was approved by the City Council in September 2021, but required an additional vote for more funding. City officials say the new 85-acre, 34-hectare campus would replace inadequate training facilities. That's what I was talking about earlier. And would help address difficulties in hiring and retaining police officers that worsened after nationwide protests against police brutality and racial injustice 3 years ago. This is the last thing I want to talk about. Nationwide protests against police brutality and racial injustice. What they're talking about are the George Floyd riots, right? And there were a few others. And we've covered this in detail on this show, right? And we've said it over and over again. All your martyrs are monsters. There is no nationwide problem with police brutality and racism. There is a nationwide propaganda campaign to create the illusion of that presupposition by highlighting every case where a black man dies at the hands of police officers. It is simultaneously an easy task and a difficult task, and the thing that makes the task easy and the task difficult are the same thing, right? The year in question, 2020, there were less than 20 total unarmed black men killed by police officers. We went down the list, and in each case, the claim they're being called unarmed was a stretch. Something like 30% of the unarmed black men killed by police officers that year were killed within reach of a weapon while reaching for the weapon. They were unarmed only because they had either not yet acquired the weapon to make good on the threat that they had verbally made to grab and use the weapon, or the weapon had somehow been stricken from their hand before they died. In the other 60-some%, right, like 3 of them were killed while driving a car at police with the apparent intent to use the car to hurt the police. They were listed as unarmed because they weren't wearing a gun. But let me tell you something. I trained a bunch of Marines in combat convoy tactics several years ago. And at the beginning of the training, we had about 40 Marines out there. And I said, okay, everybody put your hands up. You know, let me see my Lance Corporals. Let me see my drivers. Who's going to be behind the wheel of one of these trucks? Put your hands up. All right. Just you. What is your primary weapon system? And one of them quick as a whip. Sergeant, my primary weapon system is the M4A1, and he just started to rattle off, and I said, sit down and shut the fuck up. No. Your primary weapon system, killer, is that big-ass armored truck. I cannot afford to wait for you to take your hands off the steering wheel to deal with you losing control of the vehicle. Your primary weapon system is the armored truck. You keep your hands on the wheel and you continue the fight. Your convoy comes into an ambush, you run bitches over. Then we got the simulator, and that shit works. But a black man driving a heavy car at a police barricade is unarmed. So we covered this, right? Nationwide protests against police brutality and racial injustice 3 years ago. It does not exist. Claims to the contrary made by the press are not misinformed or ill-informed. They are explicitly and intentionally saying false things. They are lying. And they're doing it for a real solid reason. This is the reason. They're bought in on the whole defund the police mechanism. So I'm going to close on this. I don't think that defunding the police is the correct maneuver. However, in the absence of the correct maneuver, which is significant training, real consequences for police misconduct, for actual police misconduct, right? I mean, there should be a disciplinary report every time a police officer asks for your ID without cause. Right? If a cop walks up to a random person on the street and says, "Let me see your ID," and upon refusal presses the issue, that should be met with immediate disciplinary action. So, there are a lot of problems that need to be addressed. Defunding the police is not the correct answer. Unless it is truly the case that policing as an institution, and this may be the case, is so corrupted that the disciplinary responsibilities of the leadership cannot be trusted to be implemented. If it is the case, as some evidence seems to suggest, that the police are operating above the law, are made immune from the law, then defunding may be the only option available. So, I'm gonna go ahead and put a pin in it on that and wrap this one up. Tomorrow is Wednesday, Woke Wednesday, and guys, there's been enough development in some of the backlash to Wokeness and Pride Month already that might just be what we have to talk about tomorrow. Cameron and I will be discussing it later today, and what the show will actually be about. But we'll have Cameron back tomorrow morning, and we look forward to seeing you on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, on Rumble, wherever you can find us. We are everywhere for now. We love you, and we'll see you tomorrow.